You feel it, don't you? The distance between us growing. Something's off. You tired?
I hope you guys enjoyed that little teaser of Beyond the Silhouette. If you guys want to see the full video for that, be sure to check the link down below, or maybe you'll kind of see it kind of sitting up top somewhere. But if you already have, let's dive into how I edited it. In this video, we're going to be talking a little bit about my process for editing a video like this. So going into things like how to choose the music and kind of my workflow around that. Going into assembling a rough edit, then going into the sound design elements of things before we finally end off with the voiceover. And with that being said, let's dive in. For this video, I really knew exactly what I wanted to get into. I wanted to create some form of moody, gritty sort of video that still felt really cinematic in its approach. And so because I already knew the sort of emotions that I wanted you to feel in the video, diving into finding the right music felt like a no-brainer for this one. This isn't always the case for me. Sometimes I go about just throwing clips onto the timeline and kind of establishing a visual story without any music. Other times it makes more sense to start with the music and build from there. And so for this project, I knew feeling and emotion needed to come first through the sound itself. So let's throw some headphones on and dive into some of the music that was chosen for this. So if we pop on over, my audio service of choice is called Audio. This video is not sponsored by them, but Audio, if you're watching, please do, why not? So my process when it comes to picking the right song is pretty straightforward. Of course, I'll kind of go through the typical sort of steps of kind of filtering through the genres to kind of help me cater some of the music that's being provided to me. But from there, I'll go through all of those songs and I'll just listen to the first 5 seconds or so. So let's kind of go through that a little bit here. So we have a few songs here. First one being Between Two Galaxies. Kind of cool, interesting, very slow though, and doesn't really quite fit what I'm fully looking for right off the bat. So we'll kind of move on. Pretty interesting, really dark and mysterious. This is where I will then skip typically midway through the song to kind of hear what the chorus sort of sounds like. So if we kind of click ahead here. A lot of interesting sound choices here. Sounds a little kind of cowboy-ish, if I'm being honest, kind of not fully what I'm looking for. And so that's the second phase of it. I'll listen to the first 5 seconds, I'll listen to like the chorus, somewhere kind of midway through the song. And if it doesn't satisfy those two requirements, then I'm moving on to the next one. However, if it does satisfy those first two, I will then go back and try to listen to a large majority of the song from essentially start to maybe not finish, but at least maybe halfway through to really get a good sense of what the song is feeling like. So this was actually the case for a few different songs within this project. This doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be the guaranteed song that's going to be used within the video, but is a clear indication of whether or not I should download it and attempt to put it onto the timeline for an edit. So there was a few different songs that we could have actually went with for this video. This was the first one that I was sort of thinking. Heavy hit in the beginning, kind of piqued my interest there. But if we let this play out a little bit, very dramatic. Then it kind of picks up a little bit, right? Very interesting on the piano hits, right? This is the sort of thing I'm starting to then envision within the edit of like, oh, okay, on each piano hit, I think I'm going to cut to a new shot. Okay, cool. What other things within the edit could be interesting to kind of play around with within the song? So I felt pretty good about this one, so we downloaded it. Another one that we did was this one here. So if we play this. A lot kind of softer, quieter, a little bit more emotional and, kind of cinematic. So kind of piques my interest a little bit. But then let's kind of skip ahead a little bit here. Yeah, and that energy, that emotion kind of comes back within the piece. A little bit slower in tempo, but I thought, why not kind of go for something that was a little bit different than maybe what I was initially thinking about, but we'll see how it kind of plays out. Then I stumbled across this song, which this, if I'm being honest, was actually later on in the process. I had originally downloaded those previous 2 songs, dropped them into the timeline, attempted to edit with them, but wasn't really necessarily fully feeling it. So this is when I then went back to the drawing board and went back and looked for more music until I stumbled across the song that you already hear in the commercial. And that part right there is what immediately drew me in. That initial 5 seconds immediately sparked all types of editing things that I foresaw myself doing if I were to implement this song with the video. Of course, right in the beginning, you just hear the violin going crazy, right? So I'm imagining a bunch of shots going back to back to back. Then you have this sort of moment where it kind of almost sounds like it kind of plays out, but then it kind of goes in reverse. And so that's also really interesting. So immediately I was hooked once I heard that initial part. But let's skip ahead. Let's see what else there is. Just that violin just going crazy. And that part right there, just a great closer. Even though it's midway through the song, a great sort of closing opportunity for the entire video. So something about that violin just kind of going crazy, kind of had that classical feel. Still also felt really dark in its approach. So it kind of worked really well with the visuals that I was foreseeing for this edit. So immediately had to download it and throw it into the timeline. So if we move back over to Resolve, now that we've in theory at this point have the song that's going to be our hero song for this commercial, we then start to play around with some of those ideas that we initially were thinking about when we first heard the song. So like I mentioned in the beginning, that violin is just going absolutely crazy, right? And so seeing all these shots going back to back to back to back to back, let's try it out. Let's see what happens. And so that's of course what we did. And so if I solo this track, just so you can hear the music just by itself in terms of what it has to offer. And so immediately dropping all of those clips and just using those like 2 frames, basically, if we kind of just dive in here a little bit, you'll start to notice here that it's really just 2 frames at most before we're into that next portion. I tried doing 3 frames, 4 frames. Those weren't really kind of keeping up with the intensity that the violin was playing. It's a little tricky to sort of hear how many times it's hitting each note, so you kind of have to sometimes go by feel. But utilizing 2 frames felt pretty good. This was then that opportunity of, okay, that was really cool. What about this kind of reverse moment where it kind of sounds like it's going, it's playing out, but then it kind of reverses back. So what would that look like? So I found this clip of the ball kind of falling down, and why not kind of play with your expectations a little bit? And so if you drop that medicine ball and it's kind of going in a particular direction, your mind is already kind of expecting the sort of trajectory that's going to be going. But what happens if it doesn't? What happens if it goes in reverse? And it kind of plays with that anticipation a little bit. It kind of keeps you on your toes. And so I figured this clip would work great for that because of the general motion that is going on. I opted not to utilize a different clip of, just as an example, where, our main athlete is kind of, maybe doing some bench presses, right? So you kind of see the weights going up, but naturally they're going to come back down. And so there already is an expectation for that motion to go into reverse. So you wouldn't necessarily even probably notice the effect. And so I opted to utilize the medicine ball because there's an expectation of the way that it's bouncing that you would think it would continue to go in a particular direction, but then it doesn't. So if we kind of play this out a little bit, so it kind of comes back, you kind of see it sort of making its way kind of to the left of the frame before it then reverses back into the other direction and kind of comes back up. So you see the ball come down, it's bouncing to the left, and then it stops, and then it bounces back to the right. And so if we kind of play that out a little bit with the music, it kind of just complements it so well with the music that was already happening in the background. Again, no added sound design here, just playing into what the music has to offer already to us. And so now we sort of have our main intro here with all the clips kind of going back and forth, right? We then have this really interesting reverse motion that's really kind of intriguing, kind of, again, playing with our expectations a little bit. Then if we kind of let this play out a little bit more, and what better time to kind of have a big kind of hit moment, right? Slow everything down. We went from very high-paced energy, quick cuts going back and forth, to immediately slowing back down, because that's what the music calls for. Part of the reason why this song worked so well is because it includes a lot of contrast within it organically. This is something that I always strive for within my edits, is I always try to create some form of contrast within the edit, whether that's through color, but also through the edit as well. You go from moments where things are high pace to slow pace. This creates interest within your video. This is what makes a great story, of course. Without that rise and fall of an action within that story, there's really no story. And so by having that contrast, 9 times out of 10 is going to lend itself to a very intriguing video. And so once everything kind of slows down within that song, I figured what perfect moment to kind of introduce our athlete, right? Before we were getting small glimpses and hints of him. Now we kind of reveal him a little bit, not fully, but we're kind of revealing him a little bit more, right? Kind of getting this nice wide shot here. Using a lot of slow motion as well to kind of re-emphasize that kind of slow moment within the music. This shot was also really interesting as well. This was one of those moments where this shot by itself works well within the edit. Originally, this shot, if I were to actually just disable the top layer, originally this shot is just him running across with the sled. And that shot is totally great and it works well. However, what if we kind of introduce a kind of relatively interesting kind of symmetrical shot where we duplicate him and we kind of have him running in opposite directions of one another? Now, this is not an idea that just randomly sparked in my head of, oh, I never thought of this before. This idea sparked from watching other videos, going on Instagram, going on YouTube, checking out other videos, and constantly being a student within the craft, looking at what other people are doing within their edits that will then spark new ideas for you. And so this was something that I have done this in the past. In fact, in our last video, Redline, our cinematic drifting video, we introduced that a few times actually within the edit. And so this was just another opportunity for me to introduce it because I just really like the way it can kind of bring a little bit more interest and abstractness to a shot that maybe didn't necessarily fully have that. And so I figured, let's take this shot, duplicate it, doing a simple mask and kind of shifting it over so that each clip has room to breathe and doesn't necessarily kind of overlap with one another. And it just worked out perfectly. Now, if we continue on here, that right there, that small little moment, that flash cut there. Introducing a flash cut is always a great opportunity for you to kind of disrupt the sort of expectation within your edit. This is not the first time that this was introduced in this video. You may or may not have noticed it happens a lot sooner in the video, right in the beginning, very quickly, once again. And again, just kind of interrupting the viewer's experience just a little bit. There's another moment here, right before we get into the slowdown of the song. Right there, super quick. I think it goes on for about, looks like 2, 3 frames before it's already out. And so introducing it here and there, not putting it behind every single cut, because then it kind of just loses its value a little bit. That's something I always try to implement as well, is less is more for a lot of your techniques. If you can kind of introduce things here and there, it allows for each one to breathe a lot more heavily and brings a lot more impact to the viewer's experience. So introducing that flash cut here and there, just kind of spicing up the video just a little bit. But again, reiterating this sort of slower, methodical time within the piece. Now, this is an interesting moment. I don't know if you picked up on that when you initially watched. However, if you kind of watch closely, you'll sort of notice a little bit of a pattern that's happening within the next 3 shots. So you have our athlete here, Brian. He's picking up this medicine ball, and that motion is going upwards, right? In that next shot, we then see this dumbbell, once again, introducing something that is not necessarily anticipated, right? When you expect a dumbbell to hit the floor, you're expecting it to kind of have some form of trajectory depending on the initial kind of drop, right? But in this case, you're seeing that this dumbbell is reversing. And so instead of it bouncing and kind of, slowing down in its bounce, you're seeing it kind of increase its bounce, right? And it kind of comes back up to the hand. So again, coming upwards. Before in this shot, we then see the final reveal of his face, and he's looking directly towards camera. So introducing this rule of 3 here, introducing the ball slowly coming up, you see the weights coming up to his hands, and then you see him raise his head. This is a subconscious moment for us where the voiceover is talking about trying to be your best self. And so at the end of the video, this is a perfect opportunity to kind of finally see our main hero here raise his head up and becoming the person that he was always supposed to become. In the beginning of the video, he comes down. You see him drop his head. He physically drops his body. But then by the end of the video, you see him come up, right? Again, that contrast, playing with that full arc of a story and allowing the viewer to have this full experience going from, quite literally down on one knee, kind of destroyed, to raising themselves back up and seeing that journey in between. All about creating story at the end of the day. So that was essentially the main rough edit with just the music kind of played in. Again, leaning into a lot of the things that the song itself had to offer. But now, how can we kind of spice things up just a little bit? And so what we can do is we can introduce a little bit more sound design within it. So part of the thing that I didn't necessarily fully like about this song is that it starts a little too abruptly. There's really no sort of moment to kind of breathe and really set the scene. You're just immediately in the action. So again, if we kind of play it from here, just immediately getting into that violin going back and forth, right? But what happens if we kind of set the stage a little bit? So if we kind of turn on a few more layers here, what if we introduce some kind of riser, right? Something that's kind of bringing us into the fold. And so we have this song written down here. If I kind of just remove the music and now we kind of focus on the sound design a little bit. By introducing that riser, it allows us a moment to be able to introduce the story a little bit more, introduce the space and the environment and what's going on, of seeing this athlete walk towards this barbell before we immediately get into the action. Again, it allows for a little bit more storytelling, just this one sound design element. From that point, we then introduce the ticking that you may or may not be hearing in the background a little bit as you're kind of going through all of those different shots. And so if I kind of solo the track below it, and we just only play that, and let's just zoom in here just a little bit, you'll hear, as each shot is going by, kind of helping us transition from shot to shot, you hear this ticking that's going on. This is not something new. This idea, once again, strived from watching other people do their work, seeing how other people edit their videos, and being very meticulous and listening properly and watching carefully in terms of what is happening within the video. Not just watching it, and enjoying it the one time and moving on, but rather going back and watching it 2, 3, 4, 5 times to kind of dissect it a little bit and kind of be intrigued about how someone might have done something. And so I can't quite pinpoint when or where I saw this before, but I definitely know I've seen hypercuts going back and forth and hearing this kind of ticking, kind of like, pinwheel kind of going on. And so I knew in my head when I was introducing this many cuts back to back to back for that long that I wanted to introduce something to kind of help us get through all of that through an extra layer of sound design. So now if we introduce that riser with the ticking, a little bit more intriguing, kind of helps us get through those initial kind of phases of things a little bit. From there, I wanted to emphasize the dramatic hit that we get with the music. And so there, once again, there was this moment here where he drops the barbell down and he gets down on one knee. And so I needed to figure out a way to emphasize that as much as possible. So we went on audio, found 2 different tracks. I found this first one down here that will kind of play by itself. Just kind of this more sci-fi-ish sort of riser, but still a riser nonetheless. Then we found this cinematic hit from audio as well. Typical sort of boom that you might kind of find on a site like that. But back to back kind of introduces a very nice sort of sequence here. Kind of completes the picture a little bit there. What happens now if we introduce the music there? It can only get better, right? Let's introduce it. Subtle, but adds just a little bit extra impact there. Let's kind of solo out the music again, and let's then reintroduce the added sound design to kind of get a before and after there. Just kind of makes it a little bit more unique at the end of the day. Now, sometimes sound design isn't always adding something. Sometimes it could be something where we're taking it away, and it introduces a very unique sort of experience there. So kind of going back a little bit to our music, towards the end of the video, you know, everything's kind of building up, building, after it kind of slowed down initially when he drops the barbell. And so what happens if at the very end, when it gets to that climactic point, once again, introducing contrast and playing with expectations, what happens if everything cuts off? Well, let's see what happens. What's going on, right? We see him kind of raise up his head, but then the music kind of cuts off, kind of makes you kind of question just a little bit. But then what if we introduce it right back immediately? Perfectly works well with the way that within the song you kind of hear the vocalist kind of give like a kind of like a hey moment, like hey, like I'm back, right? Kind of just works so well here. Pretty cool, right? So finally, now let's talk about the voiceover. I knew within this piece that was going to be the final component. The voiceover was going to tell the story that it needed to do. And so this was something that we already had pre-drafted up, and I knew all the different things that I wanted the voiceover to say up until a certain point, because I wasn't necessarily too sure how the edit was going to go. So I had a really clear understanding of what I wanted it to talk about, but then we were going to more than likely have to change things up, kind of space things out, and kind of go about it in a different lens depending on how the edit went down. And so I utilized artlist.io for their AI voiceovers just because my voice is not that great and I don't necessarily know anyone who has that good of a voice. So we found the right voice for this piece. We input all of the scripted elements that we wanted it to say, and we dropped it into the timeline. Now, this is never going to work perfectly when you implement this. This is something that you're going to have to kind of manipulate a little bit. So as you can see, this track here on A2 is where I have all of my voiceover elements. And so you can clearly see that there's plenty of kind of breaks in between. And this is because this is where all of the sound design and music is sort of telling me to kind of implement these breaks and when to kind of introduce the voice back in. And so if we kind of play it back here and just kind of single out the voice itself.
You feel it, don't you? The distance between us growing. Something. You tired? Or just comfortable?
So what's interesting that you might be noticing is that I'm utilizing the visuals and the sound cohesively to kind of help me dictate where is the best time to introduce the voice back in. So in this case, when the voiceover says,
You tired?
"You tired?" I wanted you to see that kind of drip of sweat kind of lends itself hand in hand. He's tired, right? Clearly, because he's sweating. And then this moment here where he says,
Or just comfortable?
right? Because at this point, he has now collapsed down. And if we kind of bring back our sound design element, not the music, but just the sound design element for this moment kind of in between, we have this part,
You tired?
the sound design element,
Or just comfortable?
and the sound design element ended, and then the voiceover comes back in. So again, just makes total sense to kind of have that good separation there before we introduce it back. And so I did this throughout the rest of the film. So if we kind of jump ahead maybe here a little bit and kind of just listen in,
We built this from ambition, from discipline,
kind of introducing his voice back
from
in
belief.
each time a new clip comes
But all
in.
that means nothing if you stop moving. So what's it going to be?
And especially this moment here, what's it going to be? Again, kind of a sound design element, but it's the taking away of sound that makes it so much more intriguing. So if we introduce that music back in with that voiceover, those words mean so much more. Now that you are so used to hearing all that music and next thing you know it's gone, those words hit just different. So if we kind of listen back here a little bit,
So what's it going to be?
and then immediately back in, just hits so much differently. And that's pretty much it. Those are your three components. You have your music, you have your voiceover, you have your sound design, and then of course you have your visuals that are help kind of tailored to those elements, and you have yourself a fantastic video. I will say, I don't want to make this seem like it's something that's just 1, 2, 3, super easy to do. This is something that takes multiple iterations, multiple tries, seeing what works, what doesn't, experimenting, placing things in different areas and seeing what works. Plenty of times I'm walking away, coming back the next day with a fresh mind, fresh set of ears, and just kind of seeing, did what I do yesterday make sense or not? Something's not really feeling quite right. Something that I do all of the time is, once again, trusting my gut. I will watch something, I will listen, and if there's something that just kind of feels off that I, can't maybe quite pinpoint, but it's just a particular area, I have to go back and I have to see what I can do to kind of alleviate that. I trust my gut, and if it's telling me something's not quite right, something isn't quite right. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That is essentially how I edited this spec ad. I hope you guys took something away from this video. I try not to get too much into the details of how to do particular things. Maybe we can do that in a separate video. And so if there is a particular area that you'd like me to focus on, feel free to let me know down in the comments, and maybe I'll make a video on it where I kind of just hyper fixate on that for you. But aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like and comment what was your favorite part in the commercial. Aside from that, take care. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bye-bye.